All right, so let's jump right in and explore this really powerful idea. What's the real difference between just being a believer and being a disciple? To get our heads around it, I want you to picture a scene from about 2,000 years ago. You've got this incredible guy, Jesus, who's just performed a bunch of miracles. I mean, the blind can see, the sick are totally healed. So naturally, this huge crowd is following him, just buzzing with excitement thinking, yes, this is our guy. Life's about to get really good.
You can just feel the energy, right? The air is absolutely electric. Hundreds of people are swept up in this moment of pure hope and hype. They are totally convinced that following this man is their one-way ticket to a better life.
But then he does something nobody saw coming. Right in the middle of all this adoration, he just stops. He turns around to face this crowd that's hanging on his every word, and what he says next just pulls the plug on the whole party. The excitement evaporates, and all that's left is this stunned silence.
He lays down this absolutely shocking condition. He basically says, you have to love me more than your parents, your partner, your kids, even more than your own life. And if you can't do that, then you can't be my disciple. I mean, can you imagine the whiplash? 1 minute you're on a high, the next you get hit with that. The entire crowd is just frozen. In that moment right there, that gets to the absolute heart of this whole idea. See, this wasn't a recruitment speech designed to get more followers. Not at all. It was a filter. The text argues that Jesus wasn't looking for casual fans. He was looking for something way more demanding, deeply committed disciples.
So here's the core analogy used to explain the difference. A believer? Well, a believer is kind of like a spectator at a football game. They're in the stands, they're watching the action, they cheer for the good plays. But a disciple? Oh, a disciple is a player on the field fighting right there alongside the captain, sharing in the sacrifice, the struggle, the whole thing.
And the idea gets pushed even further with this really sharp question. Are you a tourist or are you a soldier? Think about it. A tourist just shows up to see the sights, have a good time. A soldier, though, enlists for a brutal war, totally prepared to pay the ultimate price. So what is that price? Well, the text breaks it down into two really deep personal costs that every single potential disciple has to face. And the first one? It hits right where we live, our relationships. Now, it is so crucial to get this right. This is not about loving your family less, not even close. It's all about priority. So imagine a situation where your faith and your family's traditions are in direct conflict. Let's say your family has a tradition of burning incense at an ancestral tomb, but your faith says that's a no-go. In that moment, who do you choose? That choice, right there, reveals your ultimate priority.
Okay, so the second cost is tied to a phrase that, we've all probably heard, but maybe we don't fully get what it means. Take up your cross. The text makes a pretty strong case that this isn't just about, enduring a tough week at work or dealing with some hardship. It is something way more profound.
So to really understand the cross, we first have to talk about this concept of the old self. And this is described as that part of you that's been running the show for decades. You know the one. It's the selfish, proud, greedy, self-centered part of our nature that wants what it wants, and it wants it now.
So taking up your cross isn't about passively suffering. No. It is the active, daily, and often painful decision to put that old self to death. It's choosing to forgive when every fiber of your being wants revenge. It's being generous when you really want to be greedy. It's being humble when you'd much rather be proud. Every single one of those choices is like another nail in the coffin of that old self.
Okay, so we've talked about the personal costs, but there are also practical ones. And Jesus uses a couple of parables to give this huge warning to the crowd, basically saying, hey, stop and think very carefully before you take another step.
First, he tells this story about a man who starts building a huge grand tower. And he starts with all this passion and excitement, He lays the foundation, the walls start going up, but then he runs out of money halfway through.
And this illustrates the point so brilliantly. The unfinished tower doesn't just sit there, it becomes this public monument to his failure. Everyone who walks by mocks him, saying, hey, look at the guy who started something he couldn't finish. All that initial enthusiasm meant absolutely nothing because he didn't have the resources to see it through.
So the question gets turned right back on the crowd. Have you actually calculated the cost? Not just the initial buzz of belief, but the lifelong investment of your time, your money, your habits, your relationships? Have you really sat down and thought through the full price of this commitment?
And if you thought that was intense, here comes the final, most demanding condition of all.
This is the bottom line that kind of sums up everything else. You have to forsake everything.
But hold on, this doesn't mean you have to sell all your stuff and become a beggar. The key is in the idea of ownership. It means giving up your title as the master of your life. Your career, your money, your plans for the future, they're not yours to own anymore. Instead, you become the manager, the steward of resources that ultimately belong to God.
So all of this brings us to the final test, a really powerful analogy that just cuts right to the chase on being authentic versus being a fake. After laying out all these impossible-sounding demands, Jesus starts talking about salt.
Think about it. Real salt, just by its very nature, changes whatever it touches. It preserves things, it adds flavor, it melts ice. It is what it is, and you can't deny its effect. But fake salt, it just looks the part. You know, it might be white and look like crystals, but it has zero impact. It's just a disguise.
And this leads to the final piercing insight. The danger for a lot of people isn't that they were once authentic and somehow lost it. The real tragedy is that they were never authentic to begin with. They had the appearance of a disciple, but they were missing that inner substance that actually makes a difference in the world.
So in the end, it all comes back to this one choice. There are no easy answers here, just a really clear-eyed look at the high cost of the call. The question is, for you to think about, are you going to stay a spectator, safe and sound up in the stands? Or are you willing to actually calculate the cost, step onto the field and become a player? Ultimately, that choice is yours.